Let me tell you
Wow,
about a
that smells
taste.
incredible. I
A
can almost
taste so
taste it.
good, it made people forget to ask
Trust
questions.
me, my friend, it
In
tastes
Kwashi
even better
village,
than it
under the
smells.
wide, forgiving sky, there was a man named Kalechi. And Kalechi's roasted chicken, it was a kind of magic. It wasn't just food. It was a memory. The first bite took you back to your happiest childhood festival. The juice that ran down your chin was always savory, never greasy. The meat, no matter which piece you got, fell from the bone as if it wanted to be eaten. It was always perfect. People would finish their portion and sit there, staring at the clean bones in their hands, a little dazed. How does he do it? They'd murmur. Even in the dry season, when other sellers have only scrawny birds, Kalechi's chickens are plump. Even when the price of grain shoots up, his price never changes. He was a quiet man, Kalechi. He didn't boast. He just worked his grill, the coals glowing like a tiny, contained sunset, the scent weaving through the village streets like a gentle, irresistible call. We loved him for it. We also feared him for it. Just a little. Because nothing that consistent, that effortlessly good, comes without a source. And Kalechi's source was a mystery. Some said he had a secret spice blend from a traveling merchant. Others said he whispered prayers over the coals. The old women, the ones who knew the world had sharp edges, would click their tongues and say, "Luck that's sweet has bitter roots." They'd look at his always busy stall, at the line of eager customers that never seemed to end, and a shadow would pass behind their eyes. They sensed it, the unspoken truth that hung in the smoky air around his grill. This is not normal. But we ate it anyway. Our desire for that perfect flavor was stronger than our fear of the question. Oh, we are so good at ignoring the questions, aren't we? As long as the belly is full and the taste is sweet. But Kalechi's story didn't start with that perfect flavor. It started with a taste so bitter, it poisoned his soul. Years before Nkwashi knew his name, Kalechi was drowning in Port Harrow. Not in water, but in dust and despair. He was a laborer, his back permanently bent from lifting things for men who never lifted a finger. He lived in a single room that smelled of damp and defeat. And every day he watched. He watched the wealthy men glide through the market in crisp, white robes. He watched them buy anything they wanted, without even asking the price. He saw their easy laughter, their houses on the hill that caught the evening breeze, their lives that seemed frictionless. A slow, hot envy began to cook inside Kalechi. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a raging fire of why not me? The question burned in his gut day and night. Why is my path so hard? Why is their life so easy? The bitterness became his only seasoning. It ate away at his kindness, his patience, his hope. He was tired. So terribly, bone-deep tired of the struggle. One evening, after a day where the sun felt like a personal enemy, he could take it no more. He heard that a powerful man, Chief Oduma, knew roads to prosperity that weren't on any map. Desperate people whispered his name in corners. Kalechi, with nothing left to lose but his misery, went to him. He found Oduma sitting on a veranda, a man of calm authority and eyes that missed nothing. "Chief," Kalechi said, his voice ragged, "I see the road others walk, the wide, smooth road of wealth. But I cannot find its beginning. My feet are only on stones and thorns. Please, show me the gate. Show me the road to riches." Oduma looked at him for a long, silent time. He saw the hunger in Kalechi, not for food, but for escape. A dangerous hunger. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "There are many roads, son. Some are lit by the sun, and take a lifetime to walk. Others," he paused, "are shortcuts through the dark. They are faster, but they have tollkeepers." Kalechi's eyes were wild with need. "I will pay any toll. I just want off this path I'm on." Oduma sighed, a sound of weary resignation. He had seen this look before. It never ended well. But desire, once it reaches this pitch, is a force that must run its course. "Tonight," he said, "after the last lamp is out, go to the old market square. Ask for Baba Iru." The old market at night was a different creature. Gone were the bright colors and loud voices. In their place were deep shadows, the skittering of rats, and a silence that felt heavy. Kelechi found Baba Iru in a hut that seemed to lean away from the moonlight, as if ashamed. The air inside was thick with the smoke of strange herbs, sweet and cloying and suffocating. Baba Iru was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles, but his eyes were two black coals, burning with a knowledge that made Kelechi shiver. "Oduma sent you," the old man stated, his voice like dry leaves rubbing together. "You seek a doorway that bypasses sweat." "Yes," Kelechi whispered, the smoke making his head swim. "There is a spirit," Baba Iru said, his gaze holding Kelechi's. "It lives in the spaces between desire and fulfillment. It is always hungry. It feeds on the very essence of wanting. Some call it the ash-eater. It consumes ambition, envy, longing, and it leaves behind substance. But it must feed on living flesh. It is a transaction." Kelechi, his heart a drum in his chest, barely heard the warning. He only heard the promise. "I will feed it. What must I do?" A ritual began. Words were chanted that twisted in the air. The herbs smoked thicker. And then, the temperature in the hut dropped suddenly, cold as a deep well. A presence gathered in the corner of the room, a shifting, formless thing made of deeper shadow and the faint, glowing outline of embers. It had no face, but Kelechi felt its attention like a weight on his skin. It was studying his hunger. A voice filled the hut, not a sound for the ears, but a vibration in the bones, in the teeth. "You carry a feast within you, your envy, your want. I will consume it, and in return, I will give you the means to consume the world."
"How?"
Kelechi gasped. "You will make food for others. I will attach myself to that food. I will feed through it. Their consumption will be my nourishment. Their satisfaction will be my feast. You will be my doorway." Before Kelechi could agree or understand, a searing, white-hot pain lanced through his right calf. He cried out, collapsing. When he looked, there was a mark, like a brand still smoking, a circle with a hollow, open center, like a mouth or a portal. It pulsed with a dull, warm ache. "The bargain is struck. You will never lack meat. You will never lack customers. But you must feed me through the food. Every day. Break the chain of feeding, and I will feed on what is left." The presence vanished. The cold receded, leaving only the smell of smoke and terror. Baba Iru looked at him, no pity in his ancient eyes. "You have your road, foolish man. Now walk it." Kelechi fled Port Harrow. He ran from the memory of those coal-black eyes and the vibration in his bones. The mark on his leg ached, a constant reminder. With a few coins and a terror-driven purpose, he arrived in Kwashi, a place where no one knew his past. He built a simple stall. He bought chickens. They were ordinary chickens. On the first day, his hands trembled as he lit the fire. The coals glowed, and for a moment, he thought he saw a shape in the flames, that same hollow form. He seasoned the birds, his mind echoing with the rule, "Feed me through the food." He put the first chicken on the grill. The moment the heat touched it, something changed. The sizzle sounded different, richer. The smoke that rose wasn't just wood smoke. It carried that faint, sweet rot scent from Baba Iru's hut. And Kelechi felt it, a faint, pulling sensation deep in his belly, as if a thread was being drawn out from the mark on his leg, through him, and into the cooking meat. The first customer was a young farmer. He bit into a wing. His eyes, which had been tired from the day's work, flew open, not just with pleasure but with something like wonder. A pure, uncomplicated joy spread across his face. This is incredible," he mumbled, already taking another bite. And inside Kelechi, down in that dark place where the bargain lived, something stirred. It wasn't a feeling he could name. It was a sense of fullness that wasn't his. A satisfaction that was cold, deep, and alien. The ash-eater had fed. And as the customer walked away, happy, Kelechi looked at the line already forming at his stall, and he knew the bargain was real. The road to riches was open, and he was standing right in its doorway, unaware that he was not the traveler, but the toll gate itself. The flavor of longing had been served, and the feasting had just begun. Success, they say, has a taste. For Kelechi, it tasted like smoke and someone else's joy. The seasons turned in Nkwashi, but at Kelechi's stall, time stood still in a perfect, golden hour of prosperity. The line never shortened. The coals never grew cold. The chickens, plump and glistening, seemed to appear from nowhere. People came from neighboring villages, drawn by the legend of the flavor you couldn't forget. Kelechi became a quiet, wealthy man. He built a fine compound behind his stall. He bought good cloth. He was respected, even envied. He had everything he'd ever wanted back in Port Harrow. But here is the truth about shortcuts through the dark. They are never free of shadows. The first sign was a chill. On the hottest afternoons, when the sun beat the earth into submission, Kelechi would feel a cold spot deep in his core, as if he'd swallowed a piece of river ice that wouldn't melt. He'd stand over the roaring fire, sweat beading on his forehead, yet his bones would ache with a damp, penetrating cold. He told himself it was nothing, the price of standing by the fire all day. Then came the fatigue, a deep, soul-weary tiredness that sleep couldn't touch. He'd wake up feeling more drained than when he lay down, as if his rest had been siphoned away by a silent, thirsty companion in the night. His movements by the grill, once swift and sure, began to slow. His smile for customers became a stiff, practice thing. And the mark on his leg, it changed. The branded circle, once just a pale scar, began to look active. Sometimes, in the dim light of his hut, he'd swear it darkened, pulsing faintly like a slow, dormant heart. On the days the line was longest, when the hunger of the village felt most intense, the mark would itch with a fierce, maddening heat. It was a reminder, a receipt. He was feeding the spirit, yes. But the spirit was also feeding on him. It was digesting his ambition and, slowly, his very vitality. The wealth wasn't a gift. It was an advance. And the collector was living inside him, growing fat and strong. One evening, after a particularly long day, the pain arrived. It wasn't the ache of hard work. It was a sharp, twisting cramp deep in his gut, so sudden and violent it drove him to his knees behind the stall. He clutched his stomach, gasping. And in that moment of agony, a clarity worse than the pain struck him. He felt it. A separate, coiled presence within his own body. A hollow, waiting thing. The ash-eater. It wasn't just a passenger anymore. It was a tenant, and it was remodeling the house. Fear, colder than the chill in his bones, finally broke through his pride. He thought of Baba Iru's words, "Break the chain of feeding, and I will feed on what is left." The rule was absolute. He could not stop. Not for a day. Not for an hour. So he became a slave to his own stall. Sickness, dizziness, bone-deep weariness. It didn't matter. The fire had to burn. The chickens had to turn. The line had to be fed. His life narrowed to a terrible, frantic cycle. Wake, light the fire, feel the pull, watch the joy on faces, feel the cold satisfaction inside, endure the pain, sleep, and do it all again. The perfect flavor had become a prison sentence. The admiration of the village felt like a judgment. He was living a masterpiece of a lie, and the truth was rotting him from the inside out. The storm that ended it began like any other rainy season downpour, loud, insistent, but normal. But as the day wore on, the sky turned the color of a bruise. The wind didn't blow. It screamed, tearing at rooftops. This was not a storm for business. This was a storm for huddling inside, for praying, for waiting. As the first truly vicious gale shook his stall, extinguishing the grill in a hiss of steam and ash, Kelechi knew true terror. The chain was broken. The fire was out. He stumbled through the sheeting rain to his compound, the wind trying to tear the very clothes from his back. He barred his door, but the silence inside was worse than the chaos outside. It was a waiting silence. The cold inside him spread, no longer a spot but a flood, freezing his limbs. The mark on his leg burned like a brand of dry ice. He lay on his mat, shivering uncontrollably. The The pain returned, not as a cramp, but as a gnawing, a consumption. He could feel the hollow presence inside him uncoiling, turning its attention away from the doorway of food and onto the walls of its home. Him. A voice, the same bone vibration from the hut in Port Harrow, resonated in the marrow of his being. It was no longer a distant echo. It was here, in the room, in him. The feeding has stopped. The debt remains. All contracts must be settled. Please, Kelechi whimpered into the dark, his voice a child's. Tomorrow, I'll make double. Payment is now. The sour, cloying stench from his grilling days, the scent of the spirit, filled the closed room, thick and choking, with no smoke to carry it. It was the smell of the thing itself, of empty hunger. Kelechi tried to scream, but no sound came out. He felt a pressure, an unimaginable internal suction, as if his very essence, his breath, his warmth, his life, was being pulled toward that hollow core inside him, toward the mark that now glowed with a faint, phosphorescent green light in the dark. He was being eaten from the inside out. Not his flesh, but the stuff of him. His spirit, his vitality, the final fuel of his being. The ash-eater was collecting its final, agreed-upon toll. Not the envy it had consumed, but the life that envy had purchased. The storm raged on, covering any sound that might have escaped the hut. When morning came, the storm had washed the world clean. The air was fresh and new. Villagers, venturing out to assess the damage, found a strange quiet around Kelechi's compound. No fire, no scent of roasting meat. Only that other smell, faint now but unmistakable, sour, like old yeast and forgotten damp. Hesitant, they called his name. No answer. The door, when they pushed it open, was not barred from within. The hut was cold, deathly cold, and empty. Not a sign of struggle. Not a misplaced item. Kelechi's fine clothes were folded neatly. His money pouch lay untouched. It was as if he had simply vanished. But the absence was not peaceful. It was a hungry absence. The air itself felt thin, sucked dry. And in the center of the floor, on the very mat where Kelechi slept, was a dark, greasy stain in the shape of a man. And from it, rising faintly, was that final, terrible, sweet rot stench. There was no body to bury, no closure to give, only a mystery that curdled into a warning. The elders, the ones who knew the old stories, gathered. They heard of the always plump chickens, the unchanging price, the chill people sometimes felt nearest all. They heard of the mark a traveling medicine man once glimpsed on Kelechi's leg. They pieced together the terrible shape of the bargain. They called the children to them, their faces grave. Listen, an old man with voice like roots said, the village sitting in a terrified hush. Wealth that comes overnight is wealth that slept in a grave. A door opened for easy gain is a door that cannot be closed. Kelechi fed a hunger, and in the end, that hunger fed on him. He thought he was a chef, a businessman. He was merely the plate from which a darker thing ate. He looked at each young, wide-eyed face. Greed whispers that it wants things, money, food, respect. But what it truly wants is a doorway. And the spirits that answer that call, they are accountants of the blood. They keep perfect ledgers. And they always come to collect what is owed. The stall was torn down. The compound was left to fall silent. No one ever sold roasted chicken on that spot again. Sometimes, children would dare each other to run past it at dusk, and they would all swear the air grew colder for a step or two, and a faint, savory sour smell would tickle their nose. Not of cooking, but of something long finished. The story of Kelechi and the ash-eater became our story. A story we tell not for comfort, but for courage. The courage to walk the sunlit roads, however long. The courage to savor the honest weariness of earned sweat. To mistrust the flavor that is too perfect, the path that is too smooth, the hunger that promises to fill itself without cost. Because in the quiet moments, we remember. We remember that the most dangerous hungers are not the ones in the belly, but the ones in the spirit. And we know, in our bones, the final, unshakable lesson of Kelechi. You can spend a fortune bought with a bargain, but you will pay for it with your soul. And the payment, when it comes, is collected in the dark, in the silence, and in full.